Get my Q&A live cheat sheet here. Well, actually, we should have it because that way we can see if anyone asks any actual questions.
Yeah, and then I think Kylan will. I think Kylan should have the link, but let me send it again.
I'm assuming it's just on Twitter. I'm just going to be on the.
All right, you guys are live when you're ready.
All right. Cool.
Okay.
We're live right now. Sounds good. Hey, welcome everybody. It's another Friday. Sorry for starting a little bit late, and welcome to our Edge Q&A session. I'm back in town once again. Paul Pui, CEO and co-founder of Edge. Been doing a lot of travel over the course of the past couple of months, but I'm glad to finally be here for another Friday session. And it's the first time that I get to be joined by RJ, and he's actually Edge number one, or Airbit's number one. He was our first employee with the company and stuck with us, you know, and with crypto through the thick and thin of the roller coaster.
Yeah, the ups and
crypto
downs.
And you know, the startup world has kind of given us, and so he's been our solid rock. Actually, his birthday just passed this week, so everyone greet him a big happy birthday. I think it's a good opportunity to really get an idea of what the general community asks our support team, because they're the ones that really get all of the questions. This is a Q&A. Well, guess what? We've got the actual, you know, the head honcho of Q&A here, because he's getting it firsthand. He's actually firsthand in his face, on the phone, on Telegram, on WhatsApp, and so we'll kind of cover stuff that he's seeing as far as the Q&A. So cool. Good to have you here, RJ.
Thank you.
I'm going to hop onto our Twitter just to make sure any questions that happen to get streamed, I end up being able to see. So let me just get into our Twitter account real quick.
Yeah, Paul, keep the mic close to your face when you talk.
Got it. Okay. I want to make sure I'm audible here, so this giant black knob in front of me is going to be close to my face. Let's see. Okay, cool. All right, so I know that, you know, I've given talks on forks in the past with the concept that they kind of enable a new kind of monetary level of competition that's never existed before. And this starts to come out as one of the questions we get. And so one of the ones that we scribbled down from previous chats was, you know, what do we do about fork coins if we don't support them yet? What does a user do? You know, you get that a lot. What does the user do, and how effectively do they get them out? What's the process? You know, what do you do when you walk through a user and getting their fork coins out if Edge doesn't already support a coin? Right.
So if Edge doesn't support the coin or the token that just came out and you want to get access to it, what we do offer is you have access to your private keys. You have your private seed in your wallet. So if you view that, you can take that information and use another wallet that supports it, and you'll be able to get your balance. So whether it's like Bitcoin Gold or Bitcoin Diamond, you can still access it.
Yep. So one thing to be aware of, and I know that we talked about this just right before the chat, is that there's some risks involved in claiming some of these coins. So RJ had mentioned, like, hey, you know, you do have access to your private key inside of Edge and Airbits, and you can use that, but that private key might actually be storing other money.
Yeah, so what you want to do first also is send your Bitcoins out to another Bitcoin wallet, so that way your funds are already protected, because when you sweep those coins, like say you're sweeping Bitcoin Gold, you're going to be exposing the private seed or the private keys, right? And if your computer or your device is already compromised, then you're at risk that they can see it and then take your funds. But by getting your Bitcoins out to a different wallet, if that does happen, your Bitcoin's already safe.
Right. So at worst, the thing that would be at risk would be any of the forked coins that you're trying to sweep out, you know, if you happen to have a compromised computer, or if you end up putting your key in a malicious app. And I know that that's happened as well with a lot of these forked coins. You know, these scammers come out and say, hey, we'll help you get the money out, install this app or use this website, when in reality the website, once it gets your private key, just takes your money.
Right.
But if you at least take your valuable pre-existing money like Bitcoin, take that out, then you're not at risk of losing kind of your high value money. You're more just at risk of losing the coin that you were trying to sweep out. So in general, you know, you do have access to the keys. You can use third-party applications, but you know, key number one is definitely get your money off those keys, that wallet, sweep it out into a new wallet before you try to claim the funds.
Right. And if you're patient, if you're not in a rush for it, you can wait until we have support for it, and we're working hard over here to get that supported. And it'll be as easy as Bitcoin Cash, where you can just split the wallet. It'll create a duplicate wallet with those forked coins. So that might be at a later time, but we're working hard at it.
Yeah. So we'd like to make it that little one tap We have that supported now for Bitcoin Cash, and so we hope to see that for a few other fork coins as well. Each of them are slightly different. They're not all just kind of copy paste Bitcoin Cash, so they're a little bit more challenging. But we'll support a handful of some of the major ones that people are looking for. Cool. The next one. I'm sure you get this one a lot. Why don't you fire away with this question?
So another one we get a lot is Monero users trying to send Monero out, and they ask, why does it take a long time to send? Not the actual transaction itself, but rather that it gets stuck spinning as you slide to confirm. And that's because it requires a lot of computation and calculations to send out that transaction, since it's a lot more complex. It depends on how powerful the device is. So if it's a faster device, it might take anywhere from 10 seconds to a minute to send, but if it's a slower device, it could take longer. And it also depends how much inputs there are. So if you're doing a max send that involves a lot of previous transactions that came in, it could take longer.
Yeah, so there's a few factors that make Monero definitely, at least currently running on Edge, noticeably slower to send money out than like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum. Number one, Monero, similar to Bitcoin, is actually a multi-address wallet. You actually have a lot of addresses in there. You just don't see them because Monero hides it behind one stealth address. And so as you receive money into all of these different addresses, when you go to spend them, you might actually have to create a fairly large transaction. And this is what's called a UTXO set, or unspent transaction output. And the larger that set is, the longer it could take for the wallet to sign a transaction, because it's to sign each of those little UTXOs. And with Monero, the signatures are more costly because you're doing this kind of this proof on each of the UTXOs, and you're also shielding all the amounts of the transaction. And then lastly, one of the things that could take a really, really long time is the mixing process. So with Monero, you're not just simply creating a transaction and sending it to the network. You're actually talking to the network and saying, hey, I'd like to create a transaction, but I'd like it to get mixed with some other people. And so it has this network coordination that needs to happen with other people that are trying to send Monero.
So there also needs to be a lot of coins ready to be mixed as well. So that could be another factor.
So there being availability of other transactions that are ready to be mixed could determine whether or not your transaction is ready to go through, or it kind of sits there and waits for a little while. And so there's definitely some stuff that we can do to optimize some of that performance. Right now the Monero code runs in, for you technical people, runs in kind of very high-level JavaScript code, which isn't as optimal of a code base. Some of that stuff we can bring down to a lower level, closer to the metal language like C++ or C, to help speed up some of that cryptography that's pretty heavyweight in Monero. But not much we can do from the viewpoint of the networking, like the stuff where we have to query and get other people to mix the transactions. That's one that's just kind of heavyweight. And so we do recommend, obviously, if you are using Monero, definitely be on one of the faster type of phones, and then have a bit of patience. Try to keep the phone alive on your screen during the time that it's trying to send the transaction, making sure it doesn't go to sleep, because then it loses.
Yeah, you might want to disable that the auto sleep.
Yeah, at least give it a few minutes. So something we're trying to improve, but it's definitely a common question that we get.
Right.
Cool.
And another one that we kind of see a lot in support, why doesn't a transaction show up in Edge? And a lot of that sometimes is because it could be network issues, maybe your Wi-Fi connection, or you're running VPN, or you're running Tor. Another issue could be the exchange. Sometimes the exchange says they sent out the money, but it hasn't been sent out. So what you want to also get is the transaction ID. If it's actually on the Explorer, like blockchain.com or Insight, if the transaction was actually sent, you can look it up and see your address or your transaction ID and see if there's a incoming transaction on the Explorers. If there's not, it might not even be sent out yet. So
yeah, I think it's funny because looking back at since the beginning of our existence as Airbitz and now Edge, I feel like this is probably the number one thing that we work on.
Yeah.
Is getting a transaction to show up, and show up reliably, and show up quickly. We care about it showing up quickly so much that I think we're one of the only wallets for Ethereum that can actually show a transaction before it's confirmed.
Right.
And we went through a lot of work to be able to do that. Many just say, oh, well, 15-second transaction times, you can just wait 15 seconds. But that's ideal, fastest case.
Yes.
That's if you paid the best fee at the time, that people are using it, and hope there's not some big ICO or giant CryptoKitties thing going on.
Right.
But if there is, you might be waiting minutes, if not hours to see your transaction. So we care a lot about this, which is why when we get these questions, we say how can we fix them. Recently, we finally resolved an issue in our old app Airbits, which was built prior to SegWit, and it not having the ability to see transactions reliably coming from what do you call kind of like newer SegWit nodes.
Yes, or from the
Yeah.
3 addresses basically
Yeah,
that are
basically.
SegWit.
Exactly, and while SegWit was a soft fork, it used what are considered kind of non-standard transaction formats by many wallets that just hadn't seen those kinds of transactions. These transactions with a little bit of extra data in them, and so them being somewhat unstandard broke some of the libraries that we were using, libbitcoin in general, from being able to detect these transactions. And so we got that resolved finally, but that was definitely a pain by our side. And it wasn't even always happening. It just happened sporadically, sometimes depending on how the node that we would connect to would relay the transaction to us. Would it be in kind of the new format or would it be in the old format? And so that's one of the causes why someone might not see a transaction. Now, depending on the actual coin that you're using, there
Right.
could be a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
So we obviously know kind of there's the Bitcoins and Bitcoin similar currencies.
Mhm.
So Bitcoin, Litecoin, Doge, which we don't
Dogecoin.
support yet, and similar ones. Those, from our experience at Edge, have been pretty reliable.
Yes.
Right. They've been able to detect. Otherwise, it's just network connectivity. RJ had mentioned, like, hey, sometimes you're on a VPN, or just the network you're on doesn't work. We recommend people trying to just switch.
Yeah, switch to
between-
different Wi-Fi network
Yeah,
or
switch
go
from one
cellular
Wi-Fi
data.
to cellular data, and we're finding that some networks just simply filter out this type of traffic. And
Right.
even though your internet works completely fine, the traffic to connect to some of these Bitcoin nodes just gets filtered out. And literally just switching from one Wi-Fi to another, or switching from cell phone data to Wi-Fi or vice versa, suddenly the transaction will show up.
Right.
And admittedly, it's something a bit out of our reach. It's like we're not really
Yeah.
able to fix what Wi-Fi you're on, filtering out the Bitcoin network. But it's a simple tip to try out.
Yeah, and also don't be too worried like my money's gone or the transaction never came in. Remember, you can always look up the address or the transaction ID, and even if it's not syncing correctly, you can at least check, the money is there. It's sitting there, but you're just having detection issues. And like Paul said, once you get that resolved, you should see it in.
Yep, exactly. Now, if you're using some of the other currencies, some of them actually rely on some service APIs. So Monero, for example,
Right.
is currently dependent on the mymonero.com API.
Mm-hmm.
And so as an API, there are some aspects of central servers being involved to help out. But an interesting nugget that we ran into with Monero was that it has to index your address and actually look for transactions, and it doesn't start looking for them until you first connect your wallet.
Right.
So there was a weird condition in Monero early on when we first launched support in Edge, where you might receive a transaction before
It was
the
being
service started looking for transactions. And so it just didn't see those transactions that were a little bit earlier. And so those accounts needed to get rewound, and started
Yeah,
looking
to
for
be indexed
transactions
earlier.
earlier in the blockchain. Just because it is so expensive to look for transactions on the Monero blockchain that they only want to start for when your account effectively was created or your wallet was created. That's mostly resolved. We haven't had any of those issues anymore.
Right.
But that's one issue. And as well,
There's
on
another
Ethereum.
one I wanted to bring up. There's one where for Ethereum, if there's time locked tokens,
Oh, yeah.
they won't appear
That's a
right
good
away.
point.
So you would have to check on EtherScan, check your
Correct.
balance there.
Correct. So there's some certain kinds of transactions that are coming from smart contracts
Right.
that may time lock the token, meaning that you're just not going to receive it until a certain point in time. Then obviously we're not going to show it even as locked. We just show it as not being received until it actually hits the address.
Exactly.
It's something that we can add in the future. It's just not on the roadmap yet to detect these time locked transactions. But yeah, a whole slew of reasons why you might not see a transaction. We do connect to a service called EtherScan for Ethereum transactions. And, like every service, it has some of its downtimes. Can't say that, no one's not at fault for this. And so sometimes if they're just having, issues or downtimes and not seeing transactions, then it might not show up. Usually it's resolved within a few hours.
Right.
So, give it a little bit of time. Cool. Looks like we got an actual question here.
On Facebook.
Question on Facebook, which was whether or not or when would Edge do an ICO?
I see. But
Yeah.
there's from Ken. Hey, Ken.
Ken, how's it going?
How's it
nice
going?
hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in. And so, oh gosh, the big question of ICOs.
Yeah, we always get that a lot.
Yeah, the
you
question
take
is
that.
though. Let's see. When will Edge do an ICO? Well, when we want to get chewed out by people for having a shitty token. But in all seriousness, an ICO and a token in general, I think, serves a very specific purpose depending on your product. And there's some awesome products that have done ICOs that have a good fit for a token. You know, I'll plug Augur, one of our partners.
Yes.
You know, they just recently launched. There's such a real utility use case for their token, and it makes sense, and it keeps things still fairly distributed, decentralized. It helps add to the security and decentralization of their app. For Edge, we would be compromising our app if we introduced a token.
Right.
Imagine if every time you wanted to use Edge, you needed to go and acquire some token from some tiny exchange somewhere that was super volatile.
Yeah.
It went up and down in price, just so you could use our application.
I think there has to be a specific use case to have a token, especially in our case.
Yeah, you have to be a good use case. You know, there's different ways to leverage a token, but either, you know, a lot of the ICOs we've seen, they leverage a token, and if they don't want it to hinder their product, what they do is they make it very, very optional. Like where the network of their product and their app don't even really need the token at all. It's like, oh, well, you can use this token to pay me for services. I'm like, yeah, well, does that mean you're going to say no to, you know, a wire transfer of $100,000? They're like, oh, no, we'll take that. I'll go, then what's the point of your token?
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to accept a wire transfer,
There's already other mediums of transfer.
which are probably going to be easier for me as a customer of your product, I'll probably use something else versus trying to find your token on
Yeah,
some
because it
good-
just makes it another step. You have to
Yeah.
convert it. What kind of exchanges support it? It's just an extra step.
Yeah, name like
Yeah.
the 5 tiny little crappy
Small exchanges.
small exchanges that you'd have to hunt into, you know, Yobit and things like that.
Yeah.
Hit BTC, you know, not to knock them, but you know, you have to go with some of the small exchanges. So if we made it mandatory, that would be good for the token holders, but it would be poor for the product. If we make it optional, that would be poor for the token holders, better for the product. And then if we make it one of these kind of like, well, it goes up in value because we burn it type of options, well, it starts to look and smell like a security, and then, well, I just don't want to go to jail.
Unless
Yeah.
we just make a token just for fun, kind of like
Yeah.
there was a token, like don't invest in this token, and people still invested in that token.
If
I
we
think
just
that's
if
another-
we just basically give one away, I think that would be the most fun thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a token, go play with it, go send it as your first token to play with cryptocurrency.
Yeah, like a practice.
Yeah,
currency,
it's a practice
currency.
coin. Although there's a bunch of coins that are practically practice coins at this point. You know,
Right.
a lot of small cryptos that we could do. But yeah, that's what we could do, is just deploy one as a practice coin. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't be something for us to raise, you know, $100 million
Right.
on an ICO. One thing that we would do, you know, to finally answer your question, Ken, is that we are keeping a close eye on the security token landscape. Actual, you know, fair equity in the company, you actually own a piece of the company or its dividends. Once that landscape gets a little more settled down, we'd love to be able to offer, you know, a token to our fan base, our customer base,
And get actual
turn them
ownership.
into actual ownership, turn them into investors. As some people may not recall or may recall, we were the first company out of the U.S. to do an equity crowdfunded offering for non-accredited investors.
Yeah,
And
that
we
was
did that
through
with
WeFunder, yep.
For WeFunder, and allow people to pay in Bitcoin to do it.
Yes.
You know, so people actually invested from all over the world using Bitcoin versus having to do a wire transfer, and they were invested as low as like a few $100s. And so that's aligned with what we believe in, like, you know, access, give
Yeah.
people access to this financial service, and do it from anywhere. And so, you know, securities tokens will get us closer to that. That's the thing we're going to look at for probably a future fundraising round. And so when that happens, Ken, you'll be the first to know.
And not only that, I think that is like the future. We'll start to see companies offer coins that allow you to get ownership of, you know, the company instead of just the legacy model.
Yeah, exactly. Legacy model
It's
meaning
probably
you're
the
going to have to
future.
go through very specific exchanges. You can't actually trade peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
But with the token model, while it still has to go through that icky regulation, there's some rules behind it, it does alleviate some of the friction of being able to exchange the tokens between people.
Right.
You know, get back to a more peer-to-peer nature, and make it more accessible. So I'm excited about that. We'll see how that goes down, and we'll potentially look at that going forward. Last one. Ooh, this is a really common question, and I think
Okay.
one that many people don't understand. This next one that
Yeah.
we scribbled here was fees.
Yeah, fees. Okay, so we get this a lot also. First, Edge, Airbits, we don't make any money from the fees that you guys pay, but it depends on the network, and the miners actually get this. They're the ones that process the transaction so it gets into the next block or whatnot. But a lot of it is determined by so how much traffic there is on the network, how fast you want to get the transaction confirmed. So those are like the variables that determines the fee. And you can think of it as if there's only so much space to fit these transactions at a certain time, there's basically supply and demand to get your transaction to fit into that next block, for example.
Yep. So it is a kind of a free market on block space, and if there's less block space, or in the case of Ethereum, it's kind of like gas space in
Yeah,
their computing
gas.
space, then you'll end up paying more. Now the part that people don't understand, because people kind of get that, they're like, okay, I get it, it's busy right now, I'm going to pay more.
Right.
The part that really confuses most users is that, well, how come I spent $5 to send $15, and yet my friend spent $100 and they spent 50 cents. Like people are not used to fees that don't scale with the amount of money you're sending.
Right.
Usually it's if you send more money, you're going to pay more.
Yes.
Right. And if you send less, you'll pay less. Whereas like, how is it that I'm paying more to send a smaller amount?
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest confusing part.
So yeah, that's a good point that Paul brings up. Another variable because of that is the way the transactions are composed of. So for example, if you have one guy sending $100 and it only costs him 50 cents, but you have another guy that's sending say $90, which is less, but it's costing him $5, it's because his transaction might be broken up where it's maybe 9 or 10 different inputs, like maybe it's 10 addresses that are like $10 each, or in this case, if it's 9 addresses that are $10 each, so that's $90 being sent, but from 9 different inputs.
Correct, yep.
Instead of the other guy sending one transaction, $100, just from one address, that's $100, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think my analogy that I always tell people is kind of like a cash register. If it's empty, your wallet's empty, your cash register is empty from at the beginning of the day. If someone goes and pays you a whole bunch of $1 bills, you got like $1,000 worth of $1 bills. Well, it takes you more time to use those $1 bills to pay someone else. And so counting all those $1 bills and transporting it to somewhere else to go and buy, say, a lunch is more time consuming than bringing over a $100 bill or a $20 bill.
Right.
And so your wallet could look like that. It could look like this cash register that has a whole bunch of coins in it and small bills. And then when you go to spend it, you got to count all of it. That's a more expensive transaction.
It's more work for the miner, so then
It's
they
more work
collect
for the
more.
miner. They've got to count all of those inputs. And so that word inputs is probably what a lot of people are new to, but there's this concept of inputs, and if there's a lot of inputs going into your wallet and you need to spend that money, it's going to cost you more. Even if you might not be sending a large amount. Like you're sending $5, but it's composed of quarters.
Yeah.
Or versus someone spending $100, but it's composed of 20s. So that's going to actually be a cheaper fee than what you would pay for this little $5 send. Now, there is a little nugget, like what we do at Airbits to try to compensate for that is that we will actually, there's what RJ had mentioned, there's this competition for space in the block. And the more you pay, the faster it confirms. The less you pay, the slower it confirms. Well, we'll try to cheat to paying a bit more of a fee in the app if you're sending more money. So if you send $5,000, that fee will generally be a bit higher than if you send $100 or $50.
Right.
That becomes one of the factors in affecting the fee. Of course, the number of inputs still affects it. You have
Yes.
a lot of change, but we'll try to nudge it up. With the understanding that when this large amount of money is being sent, you want that to happen more quickly and get that settled quickly, versus the evil $5 cup of coffee that you shouldn't be using crypto for, right? And so that you might not care when it really confirms, and so the fee will be a little bit smaller in that case. That's something unique that we do at Edge.
Right.
Cool.
Going with the fees, how do we calculate our own fees in Edge Wallet? Is it that different from Airbit? Like, how do we do it?
Yeah, so Airbit's the main difference is exactly what I was mentioning in we nudge the fees up
Yes.
a little bit if you're spending more money, and we nudge them down if you spend less money.
Okay.
And so the nudging is where it's just a little bit different. The nuanced details of which are kind of like a mini white paper. I think we're actually going to be posting a blog post about the exact formula that we use.
Right.
The formula is kind of complex to kind of verbalize it here today, but there is a slight difference between Edge and Airbits. It actually simplified a little bit with Edge. But we'll, I say stay tuned for that in a blog post coming up. We got a question from the audience here.
Yeah, so we have from Hey Bossy Lady.
Yep.
Yeah, is there any possibility or interest in adding BitShares or WhaleShares tokens with Edge?
Got it. So BitShares I'm very, very aware of. We
Yeah.
partner with OpenLedger, which is a platform, decentralized exchange on BitShares. And there's been some idle talk of adding BitShares or other, I guess you call them like graphene architecture
Right.
coins. So Steemit is
Steemit's
actually
another
one that's
one.
been talked about. And then, of course, EOS.
Yeah.
And so I would say of those three, the ones that have most support and enable us to be able to add those tokens would be Steemit and EOS. We've
Yes.
kind of roughly looked at the libraries available, the tools that we could use, and the tools for those two seem to be
Similar enough?
similar enough and also pretty available for us to tap into. But if you have people that are developers on those teams for those different chains, and you can put them in touch with us, a quick 1-hour call with one of the key developers at some of those projects really gives us a good idea of the effort involved and whether or not we can go forward with it and how soon we can go forward with it. So I'd say, yeah, put us in touch with some of them. Maybe we can give you a more accurate answer. But it's definitely everything is possible. I'll say anything is possible.
Yeah,
it's that there's so many. What do we prioritize?
Yeah,
But
basically what resources we have and what the users want. That's how I
Yeah.
always put it.
And so far, it seems like what the users want. We've gotten some requests. Decred obviously is very popular. Digibyte has been becoming more and more popular. But difficulty being the thing we have to balance. Like Stellar,
Yeah.
now that what did it recently got certified as?
Yeah.
Can I get the little term?
Shock
compliant.
Yes.
But it's something we're looking at as well. And actually, the Stellar library is actually fairly usable as well. So that one we might consider in the medium-term future. Cool.
Okay.
Well, we're past our half-hour mark. I think we started a little bit late, but we're ending a little bit late. So I think we
Maybe-
covered a good amount of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we can throw in one more.
Sure. What do you want?
Okay.
What do you want to touch on?
How does Edge compare to McAfee's BitFi wallet?
the
I think,
BitFi.
yeah, I want to get into that.
Yeah,
So-
Ken's probably going to care about this one a
Yeah.
lot. So there's some similarities that people say, oh, look, it's a password.
Yeah.
Right? In Edge, I create a password. On BitFi, I create a password. There's a huge fundamental difference between the two of them, though.
Okay.
Is that, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, to my understanding, this is what I got from their white paper. I haven't directly talked to any of the architects over at BitFi, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. But to my understanding is your private key in BitFi is derived from your password.
Okay.
So effectively, I can actually, if I wanted to guess your password, I could start making guesses and see if it generates a private key,
Yes.
which then generates public addresses, which actually have money on the blockchain,
Right.
right? And I can start doing that today
Yeah.
as an attacker. If I know some of your personal information and I want to take a guess as to what it is, and you can't rate limit me. You
Right.
can't say, like websites,
Yeah, so you
you
can't
try to
rate
log in
limit.
and you get it wrong like 3 times.
Mhm.
You say, sorry, you got to wait.
Yes.
Now you got to wait 10 minutes. Now you got to wait a day. Now you
Right.
gotta
That
wait a
one
week.
doesn't have that rate limit protection.
There's no rate limit protection. I can simply take as many guesses as I have computing power for. So it's going
Yeah.
to take me computing power. I got to have fast computers.
Yeah.
But I can start taking guesses immediately and start trying to break into accounts and guess passwords. Now, with Edge, while there is a password, that password is not your private key.
Mhm.
Right? That password is a way for you to encrypt your private key and upload it to a server and download it from a server. Since it's a server that's holding your private key, if someone wanted to try to brute force your password, the server can say, sorry, you took 3 guesses incorrectly. Now you have to wait.
It'll take even a longer amount
Take
of
even
time
longer.
to make another guess.
Right. And that's something we can tweak. We can say, no, you got to wait 3 seconds, you got to wait 30 minutes, you got to wait 30 hours before you can guess again.
Right.
That severely, severely hampens the ability for someone to try to brute force your password.
Yeah.
As well, you can add 2-factor authentication to that, which
Yeah.
means that the server is not going to allow someone to authenticate
Unless
they
it's
have-
their own the
unless
same
it's their
device.
own device. Exactly. And so that is one of the fundamental inherent differences. And to my understanding, Steemit actually tried to make a password that would turn into a private key, except that they had a whole lot of accounts brute forced and hacked.
Yeah, I think it was in the beginning, right?
It was early in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore with Steemit, but now they learned a lesson that I think other projects should, and it seems like Bitfi isn't exactly applying that lesson. Now, I'm sure they're putting a lot of more juice into the password, and they've got this bounty. Hey, break into this account.
Yeah,
and
$100,000 bounty.
But that's a bit of an unfair bounty because if they created the password, they could create something that's basically 24 words and unbreakable.
Yeah, and like totally random as well.
Yeah, completely,
so-
totally random. But that's not something. That's not something that an average user would actually create.
Yeah, they might create it based on something really short.
Right, exactly. So the point is, you can make an unbreakable
Mm-hmm.
wallet on any platform.
Yes.
Now the question though is, what is your typical user going
Yeah,
to
your
do?
your general user, what are they
Yeah.
going to do? Are they going to pick something easy or something personal?
Right.
And then they can get social engineered.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
And so, reading through, there was a 50-line paragraph on the Bitfi docs on how to create your password.
Right.
And it was fairly lengthy. It had a lot of warnings. It had a lot of suggestions, and it was intimidating.
Yeah.
It was relatively intimidating, and it's incredibly important there, even more so important than it is on Edge, because that password is your private
Private
key.
key.
It's absolutely your private key, and people, rest assured, right now people are brute forcing accounts on Bitfi just because they know that this is how people are creating accounts.
Yeah.
And if it's weak, it will get hacked. And if it's not weak and it is strong, realize then that while you might have a fairly unhackable wallet, it's also a very hard one to use.
Mhm.
Because since the key is not stored on the device,
Right.
that means anytime you want to spend money, you've got to enter this giant long
Yeah,
password.
so it's not even convenient. You can't
It's not
easily
convenient.
spend and buy stuff.
Yeah, so if you wanted something that was actually convenient and usable and memorable and not something that you're going to screw up,
Right.
then that might be a tough option. But, I welcome people to try it. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you like or dislike about it. But realize that is one important thing, is that password is your private
Private
key.
key.
And people can start guessing it and brute forcing it immediately right now with no limits on how many guesses they can take.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the main differences.
That is, yep. Okay, yeah, we're definitely over on time now, but a very good last question. Good one to end on.
Yeah.
Save any questions you guys might have for our next session next week. I'm still around. I'm not traveling for the rest of July.
Right
And
on.
so I'll be in town next Friday, joined by hopefully another one of our staff before I take off for a trip to Japan next month.
Sounds good.
Cool.
And for anyone else, if you have tech support questions, feature requests, you can reach out to us at support@edge.app. And if you have any interest in partnering with us, just reach out at info@edge.app. We're also on Telegram and WhatsApp. Find us there, ask us our questions, and we'll be here next week.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.